The Heresy Accountabilibuddies Podcast is dedicated to all things Horus Heresy. This podcast delves into the grimdark universe where Primarchs clash, legions rise, and loyalties fracture faster than a Land Raider's track. But it's not just about the lore of the Horus Heresy. The Accountabilibuddies also explore the gaming side of things, from painting and modeling tips to product reviews and ideas to help you in your hobby. So, whether you're a seasoned Forge World veteran or a fresh-faced scout, this podcast is your Vox channel to the galaxy. Expect discussions on lore, modeling, gaming, and maybe even the shenanigans that your hosts somehow seem to find their way into. Remember, in the grim darkness of the far future, there are only two things you can count on: heresy and your trusty Accountabilibuddies.
Welcome to the 83rd episode of the Heresy Accountabilibuddies. My name is John, and this episode I'm joined by
Brian,
Dan,
Duncan,
Jack,
Jamie.
And our 83rd episode actually has some Heresy releases, some Heresy previews, and some Heresy pre-orders. We're a chock-full episode today. But before we get started into hobby stuff, go ahead and throw it over to our sponsors really quick.
Do you love resin bases? Then go to our sponsor, Elric Hobbies, for all of your basing and basing accessory needs. Use code HeresyABB at checkout for a discount. Legendary Monument Hobbies. Monument Hobbies is a one-stop shop for all of your painting needs. Use code HeresyABB at checkout for a 5% discount on your purchase. Pop Goes the Monkey. Find maker of third-party accessory bits of arms, legs, backpacks, and more, where you can get 10% off your first order over $125 with code HeresyABB at checkout.
And now that we're back from our sponsors, this week in hobby, I'll go ahead and kick it off. I'm actually, as I talk right now, washing some of the bases I got from Dragon Forge and Elric's Hobbies to go with my Cobra Militia, because I'm going to try to get a newish militia army done for the Texas Open in August. I'm going to try to shoot for that, getting that Sentinel army already. As well as that, I went ahead and worked on some Recon Marines during our Heresy Hump Day hobby event on Wednesday. And so I built 20 Recon Marines with Nemesis bolters. I've got to finish off their shoulder pads and arms, or shoulder pads and heads and things like that, to get those guys finished up and ready to be primed with the big batch of Marines that I'm also working on. And then did a lot of cleaning up around the house and got a new gaming PC because last week mine died. And so I got everything rerouted, got a new monitor in, and got everything cleaned up and whole new desk set up. So that's pretty much been everything I've been up to. What about Brian?
Not much. Been pretty busy with work. I did manage to do a kind of sort of hobby progress and finishing up 10 gaming tables for a game store here in town. So I was throwing on the clear coats last night during the hobby chat call. And other than that, that's been about it. How about you, Jamie?
So this week I was pretty busy with my oldest doing club tryouts for soccer, but was actually able to get some hobbying done. Yesterday, most of the day, actually, I painted. Worked on 3 sabers, built more rhinos, just what I need. 3 more rhinos, and started laying some base coat down on 2 Contemptors and a Dorado Dreadnought, and started working on like 140 plus bases, like of different sizes for my army, because I've got a bunch of troops I'm gonna get to right after I finish the rhinos and the Dreadnought. So a little more cleaning up, and I ordered ended up ordering also about $200 worth of battle foam last weekend after the show. So hopefully that'll have me set for a while. And other than that, that's pretty much it. So I'm going to throw it to Duncan.
Let's see here. During the hobby hangout on last Wednesday, I got the first 30 Rampagers. I got them base coated. I got them zenithalled, along with a champion character for that for the World Leaders. Other than that, I didn't get a lot of hobby done at all. But I did get approximately a third of the basement emptied, reorganized, and cleaned out. I now officially have space for a table, and I acquired another bookshelf. So I'm going to spend this week putting the bookshelf together, moving more stuff over onto that bookshelf, reorganizing the two bookshelves behind my computer desk, get all of that handled so I can actually have some more storage space, move more stuff that has been shifted around in the basement onto the shelves. And once I get that done, that'll let me clear out the second third of the basement, and move 2 additional bookshelves that I have that are currently packed full with stuff. It'll let me get stuff off there and into the places where it needs to go. And then I can put the rest of the gaming stuff that'll be on in various boxes and etc. onto those 2 shelves also. And that will have the entire space in the basement cleaned out, ready for gaming tables to be built and put in, which is the plan for sometime in the next 4-ish weeks, I think. So that's what I've done. Jack, good old Jack, what have you done lately, sir?
I edited and posted a podcast. Dan, what about you?
So I talked about last week. I had started building an armature. So I got one armature completely done with a set of weapons magnetized, and now I am working through. I have 5 knights, and I have 4 sets of armatures and 2 Moirax models I picked up. So I'm going to magnetize everything. So in theory, I can bring Moirax with armature weapons, since they're so close to the same model. So I am kind of working on right now. I've got an armature and a Moirax in various states of building, as well as working on putting those magnetizing all those weapon options. I had to order some magnets for that. They're set up. The weapons are all set up that you can put I think it's a 6x1 millimeter disc right in all the weapons. And I didn't have any magnets that size, so I had to order some magnets. But yeah, so working through my armature knight list, and once I get all the armatures built, then I'll start working on the rest of the big knights. So hopefully, I'll be out of touch for a couple weeks, but when I get back this summer, it'll be get everything built and primed, and then be able to start painting this stuff all up, with the intention right now that nothing else happens, I'll have nights at Michigan GT.
Excellent.
This all
And if
sounds
not
fun,
that, Adepticon next year. I think that's everybody's hobby, right? Did we miss anybody in there? I don't think so.
No, so I guess we'll go ahead and go on to the new releases. So as we advertised last time, there was a big Warhammer preview event coming this past Saturday during one of the Texas Open events, and we all kind of stayed up, and well, it was noon on a Saturday, so not exactly staying up. So I usually sleep till noon anyway. But we went through and watched them reveal a couple of new Canonist models for Sisters. Watched them reveal, in my opinion, one of the ugliest Gene Stealer cult models available.
The Mars attack guy with the big giant head.
Yeah.
It was a Mars themed review or preview.
I was about to say that leads us nicely into the actual Martian reveal of Plastic Mechanicum, and GW. I'm going to say they knocked it out of the park with this. There's a lot of little subtle things that you can see on these models that kind of differentiates them for resin, but at the same time they blend in really well with the existing models. We've got plastic Thalax with all the gun options, and new head options. So before you kind of had that mirrored faceplate. Now they've got a mirrored faceplate with a little kind of grill at the bottom for teeth. They've got what looks like Thanatar heads on the Thalax, which I'm probably going to do all mine in. You've got photon thrusters, multi-meltas, plasma fusils, the whole 9 yards as weapons are concerned.
They look a little beefier too. If I had to like compare them to the current line, they're just like
definitely. Yeah, they're a little squatter. I think that the legs are a little thicker. Either they're not as extended as much, or something's going on there, or it could just be the angles of the photos, since we don't have a lot of like comparison photos. Next was the tech thralls, and they brought up something interesting in the cast. They said that the tech thralls kind of got a redesign in GW, and the fact that these are basically just battlefield pickups, and they turn them. They're kind of like zombies. They just pick them up, fix what needs to be fixed, throw a gun on them, and throw them out into the fight, which is a lot different than the way the fluff used to be, which is where they were, kind of, they didn't completely mind white people, but they put them together and then got them out there onto the battlefield to kind of soak up bullets. With this change to the way the tech thralls are envisioned, you're getting a lot different tech thrall models. Now, considering building these things is going to be a pain because it looks like there's a bunch of different types of models to build with different head options, different arm options, missing arms, different legs, things like that. For 2 points a model, these are probably going to be pretty annoying to build.
And it only looks like they have was it a Laslock? Is that what they call that?
Yeah, they only have a Laslock on the pictures, so I don't know if they've lost the Mitral lock or the close combat weapon. Because Legacy can still take close combat weapons.
So
yeah, they've all got bayonets.
I didn't study them that closely, but do you think they'll be, the kind of the way Marines are now, where there's 3 or 5 sculpts and you get, if you get 20 of them, you get 4 repeats or something like that? Was it duplicated that way, or did it look like it's not all 20 different, or it's not like
5 heads?
Yeah, I'm looking through it, and you've got the kind of the Michael Jackson leg pose where both the knees are kind of cocked in, and then you've got leg spread pose. Yeah, I think there's like 4 different leg poses.
Yeah,
and then what looks like 4 or 5 different heads and 4 or 5 different left arms. And the left arm is definitely a separate piece because I can see the gap on a couple of them.
I wonder if they're the modern style where they're not interchangeable though. So it's
well,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
couple.
They're one model kind of thing, so that always the left and right arm go with the one pose. I'm not sure.
I think the left arms, because it's just kind of flailing out there, I think that might be not dependent, but I think the right arm and backpack might be.
It looks like there's also one that has an what do you call it? Cybernetics on it, like a cybernetic leg.
Yeah.
But it's still the inward knee canted one, so maybe it's like a sergeant type option or whatever that would be called.
Yeah, they didn't have sergeants from what I remember. It was just bodies.
I don't know. Yeah. But there's it's probably like 4 or 5 different poses and then like a couple different arms.
Yeah, I'm just thinking at 2 points a model. I mean, I know I hated building all the Cobra militia at 2 points a model for them, which is kind of why I'm not minding being Solar Rocks and not having to field as many models. But yeah, that would just be annoying. And God bless the man that had to paint, because he didn't. The guy that painted them didn't really kind of combine colors a lot. It's a lot of different colors on these things. You got reds, silvers, dead flesh, black leather, brown leather, green cables, hazard stripe cables. Like there's a lot of different differentiation on these models.
Yep.
Next, we've got the Triaros. There's a couple of different design changes on this, from the guns and then what looks like a missile launcher type thing on the back of the canopy. Hopefully this is also a new decal sheet that's showing off in the middle of this. I like the fact that the side door looks like it's completely separate parts now, so it can actually open. And then some of the other changes, like the guns and stuff, it looks like they could actually move instead of before they were really limited. And then we got plastic Castellax with all the weapon options, including the 2 different close combat weapons. Whereas before, you just kind of hoped you got what you wanted. And they've got multi-meltas, Darkfire, and the Mauler bolt cannons.
In the close combat, spending death blades.
Yeah, the death blades and the power saws and the clamps were the two different
And I will
ways.
say these do look a little different than the resin ones. They kind of look a little more squat, like
Yep.
they've been lifting a bit more at the gym, doing leg day.
And then speaking of squats, you've got the Thanatar, which is a little beefier as well.
Yeah.
The back plasma mortar actually opens up kind of like a flower, which is something they said that they were trying to design before. They just couldn't pull it off in resin because everything was so easy to break. That gun ammo feed looks like it's not going to be a giant pain to build anymore because it was horrendous to connect that with resin because it really didn't want to bend the way you wanted it to, no matter how hot you got it. The one thing I will say, between the Triaros and the Thanatar, we don't have the other options. So the Triaros can, in resin, can also kind of become that mortar tank. And then the Thanatar, you've got the two different other versions, the Calyx, which is the last cannon version, and then there's one without a plasma mortar. It was like a straight shotgun.
Yeah. Well, and then they're coming out with... Sorry, go ahead, Dan.
I was just gonna, the way they've been doing like the dreadnoughts, I would assume that stuff's coming as an upgrade kit or another option, right?
Well, they still have never put the upgrade out for the Deradio, whatever you want to call it. So you still can't get the last cannon and the... You can't get the last cannon and the Volkites yet for it on the plastic kit.
Right. I still think those are coming eventually, but maybe I'm wrong.
You would hope.
Finally, there's a new Magos Dominus or Archmagos or whatever you want to call it, with a conversion beamer, a Volkite, and a Corpusant staff. So it's nice to finally have a Corpusant staff model, although we still don't have a Photon Gauntlet model.
And then there's the battle group too.
Yeah, the battle group is going to contain, it's a little odd, it's going to contain Thralls, 20 Thralls, 2 Castellax, 6 Ballax, and a Triaros. An odd kind of choice, kind of half Tecmata and half Cybernetica. I would almost rather they throw out the Thralls and include a Thanatar, or throw out the Castellax and include some other more Thralls or something like that. There's a bunch of different ways you could take that. It's kind of a half and half list.
But that box is going to sell like crazy. That's regardless.
Well, and I bet you there'll be a whole bunch, and I think a bunch of people on here will probably be that case where people will buy it and split them in half. I've certainly pictured that happening quite a bit.
The John, you want to go over the other news?
We also had previews for Legions Imperialis, the Devastation of Talarn, where the Iron Hands attacks the great loyalist bastion of Talarn. Oops, sorry, that's a typo from GW. Iron Warriors.
No, they
were really involved.
Say that. It was just in the typo in the press release, but Bob the intern screwed up again, sorry.
Yeah.
But there's supposed to be like 40 pages of fluff in that, from apparently what they're saying. And then there was a bunch of new tank releases to go along with it. So
previewed in that is the Saber tank, which is going to be super tiny. The Punisher Karen, the Arquas Karen, new Lehman Russes, and
Exterminator, Annihilator, and there's one other one, Executioner and Demolisher.
Yeah, and there was also some of the super heavies. If you look at the cover, that is not an epic scale tank on the cover of that. It looks almost like a 28 millimeter version of a Shadow Sword, except that's a Shadow Sword we don't have in 28 millimeter.
Yeah, it's got all the Solar Ox fluffy bits on it.
Yep. So it wouldn't surprise me if we get a plastic Baneblade re-release for the Solar Ox not too far in the future, which we all kind of thought was going to be coming anyway.
It'd be a good time to put it's probably share parts with the Marine one too. So
yeah, it'd be a good time for a Christmas release or something like that.
Yep.
Then we also got previews for a new type of Necromunda. So Necromunda is moving on to Hive Secundus, which is the second largest hive on the planet of Necromunda. Apparently, there were experiments with gene stealers. The preview video had a bunch of really cool terrain. It almost looked like, if anyone's familiar with Mordian, the guy that did the Super Heavy Walker that I built a long time ago, it had Kickstarters for 3D printable ZM style terrain with broken walls and generators and things like that. All of that was really pictured in the release video, and then the box set has none of that. It's really just a flat table and a couple of doors. I mean, it's nice to get some different layouts for tiles, which is nice. I mean, I'm probably going to build those in 3D, but I'm really waiting for some of the terrain to come out. Also, we finally see a release of the Spires, which is kind of uphivers that get a bunch of really cool gear together and they go down and kind of purge a bunch of dudes when they get bored. And then there's also some freaked out gene stealers that really remind me of kind of a chupacabra look, where they look kind of diseased and bleeding all over the place. It's really weird looking.
Really weird heads. Like their eyes are like
Yeah.
bugging out of their faces almost.
Yeah, and some of them have like an odd number of eyes, and they're very asymmetrical. There's also new Van Thar releases that are more ranged combat heavy. So you got snipers and medics and scanners. What we all thought was going to be enslavers turned out to be some type of Tyranid bioform thing that goes around. And then the other thing that the Gene Stealer cults are getting is it looks like they just added a sprue onto the Hive Scum box, and so you can get some cultists that way. So, like usual, a bunch of cool stuff that you can steal for either NPCs or for terrain for ZM.
They did say that. I mean, the gene stealers are not supposed to be pure strain gene stealers. It's a new type of gene stealer for the game, so they're meant to be diseased, mutated.
Yeah,
and
They're weaker than the normal ones, apparently.
Which, I mean, in Necromunda, you almost kind of have to, because a standard pure stain gene stealer would probably tear up most of the hive, to be honest. But
a bunch of malnourished kids, yeah, that thing would just run through them.
so,
I know that apparently, according to the fluff on them, they've been rejected, or they're likely to be rejected by the hive mind or something because they're so fucked up somehow.
They're talking gibberish basically in the void, in like the communications back to the hive mind.
Yeah,
The hive mind's like, nope, not dealing with that.
yeah. I mean, it kind of makes sense.
They're like, no, we're not going there.
well, and you always, it was always kind of the lore thing, like, why don't they come and, just wipe out everybody when they know there's so much biomass people there? I mean, and this kind of gives a lore reason why they wouldn't. So,
I mean, maybe that was the kind of, they were trying to figure a way to keep the hive mind from coming to planets. Maybe that's what they succeeded at.
Yeah, Secundus was never really revealed why it fell. It was always kind of some weird ass experiment went on, and then people got corrupted, and nobody's heard from them since. And so, I do like that they're pushing the fluff forward a little bit. I was kind of hoping for Aya's Serene content, which is a space station that's in Necromunda where all the nobles are housed and things like that. But going this way is really cool too.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Yep.
I think I figured it out. They were doing that space fentanyl. Now the hive mind doesn't want them.
Property values would go down too much if they integrated them.
I guess. I don't know. Just don't know.
But yeah, that's all of our GW previews. Sunday pre-orders is nothing Heresy, so that's kind of lacking.
Made to order terrain though.
Yeah, there's the made to order terrain, which is all of the stuff that has. It's not that old, to be honest with you. A lot of it was the Mechanicum terrain that had come out before. Some of the broken buildings that go with the Civitas Imperialis stuff that's currently out, and then the Void Shield generator and plasma generators. That's all going to be made to order starting next week. You'll probably get it by Christmas.
Christmas? No, didn't it take a year for your stuff to come in? Like literally, you ordered it at Adepticon and it came in the next Adepticon.
I ordered it in like October and it came in like late February.
Okay. And there's also a Horse Heresy Omnibus. It's the 14.
Yeah, a collection of a few books that are already existing. The omnibus is kind of weird because it's re-releases of stuff that's already out.
Yeah.
Kind of throws a monkey wrench into planning on your finishing your collections. In my opinion, it's a little weird because you got to keep track of
Sorrow,
3 different
Master
numbers now.
Mankind. That's all I saw. Korax. Korax, Master Mankind, and yeah, that's it. There's only 3 in it.
Yeah. On the non-official GW front, Joy Toy has put up pre-orders for Leviathan Dreadnoughts in the G.I. Joe scale, a Sons of Horus Dreadnought with 2 close combat weapons, and an Imperial Fist Dreadnought with a Meltal Lance on one arm and a Storm Cannon on the other.
As we say, the 1% scale. The 1% of 1% scale.
Yeah, no joke.
I don't remember what were the chassis guns on the Imperial Fist one.
I think it had the flamethrower chest, and the neck, and the Sons of Horus one had the Volkite chest.
I have a non-GW semi kind of sort of related release. I
got
wanted to throw out
one
here
more
too.
release to talk about,
Go
then
ahead.
I'll turn it over to you. Yeah, so Starforged also released pin heads. These are colored in pin heads, like helmets. You've got Imperial Fist, Dark Angels, Ultramarines, Grey Knights, Blood Angels, and White Scars. They've also got a Skitarii, a Casterkin, and then 2 different Sisters of Battle. They also released keycaps. So if you've got a mechanical keyboard, you can buy these little keycaps. They're based on some of the old terrain. So the old Sad Eagle gun is what one of them is called, and the Plasma Obliterator are now keys. They're $63 per key, but they can move around like a gun and you can pose them. And then there's also they call it Horus Heresy Grey Knights Imperial Badge. It's kind of styled like the Purity Seal pins, except it's got a Aquila ripping up a Chaos Star on it. It's kind of neat. I think that'd be a neat one to get to put on a bag or something like that. But yeah, that's all of the unofficial, official GW stuff. What you got, Dan?
So I know many of the podcasters and listeners are familiar with Dave Taylor has books on terrain and modeling and painting, a lot of stuff. There's a new Kickstarter. I guess it's running right now. They've done a series that's the art of, and they're up to volumes 10, 11, and 12. And the one that kicks out to me is Sam Lenz, who I was lucky enough to take a class, and I believe some other folks here know him, and I know a bunch of people know his work. So there's an art of Sam Lenz book in there that I'm really geeked for. I will probably be picking up to Kickstarter just to get a copy of his art book.
I already ordered it as well. I did the
Oh,
Kickstarter on it already.
Yeah, it
did you
dropped
just go for
today.
his, or did you go for the whole set?
No, I just went for his.
Yeah.
He's a friend. Anything that
Yeah,
supports him, I'm gonna be happy to do.
Yeah, I've
so
got one of the other issues, the Bjarn Doll, I think is his name. He did a lot of ZM stuff, and his book goes through a lot of his. It's not just pictures of their artwork; it also goes through like how they design their stuff, some of their more famous pieces, and then stepping through. I think like Roman Lapat is pretty famous. He's also one of the books that's coming out this time. He's famous for doing framed dioramas, like it's a picture frame that's going to come alive in 3D, and so he goes through how he plans those out and how those go through. And I took a couple classes with him, and he's a good guy to learn from. But the books go insanely more detail than he does in the class.
Yeah, it talks about it. Also goes into some of their inspirations and a lot of that kind of stuff. So I think so. A couple of the other ones I don't recognize one of the artists that are in the the other 2 are the previous versions of it, as much as the Sam Lenz haven't taken a class with him. But I don't own any of the books, but I've seen excerpts and bits of them online of the other books as well. And they're the real deal. There's good stuff in there as far as both painting techniques and inspiration and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, if you're interested in that sort of thing, I'd recommend it. I'm gonna pick up the Sam Lens one, I think. But yeah,
Yeah, what I saw about it and what I've heard about those before really interested me. So when you posted that, I was like, oh, that's cool. So yeah, I jumped on that.
yeah. I figured you probably would. I knew you said you knew Sam, so
Yeah, Jack knows him as well. He normally comes up to the Adepticon room and hangs out for a little bit. He's also him and Adam Loper are some of the big names for the Army Painter stuff.
yeah. Cool. Actually, Caleb Wissenbach, who I know some of us, not necessarily here, but in a bigger chat, have taken his classes, was whose post where I saw this advertised at and found out about it. So
Dig it.
He's an exceptionally skilled individual.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of exceptionally skilled individuals out there.
Sam is freaking nuts.
None of us.
I'd say everybody on this podcast is pretty skilled as far as painting goes. Don't sell yourselves short. You may not be winning golden demons, but I would say I think I would say over half the people that had models in the Heresy room that painted them themselves this year, if they put their mind to it and really put a model together to do it, probably could have had a pinned model in a golden demon if they wanted to.
It's quite possible. I know a lot of us have gotten better over the years. Not even including myself, but I know that a lot of us have become a lot better over the years as we've been doing this group, as it were. But some people started off phenomenal and have just somehow elevated beyond that. And Stan was one of them. I count myself very lucky that I have a Perturabo painted by Sam because it's insane. Every time I take it out and I look at it, I just see more and more stuff that I hadn't noticed before, and it's just amazing.
Yeah.
Pretty well with my 64 count of Crayola.
You keep on with that 64 count of Crayola, sir.
Well, we want to move on to discussing mission design for fun and interesting missions we've experienced in our tours of duty and Heresy.
I think we could do that. Fair warning, I have not run an event. I have designed missions for events, but I have not run an actual event. So my input on this is likely to be somewhat light. I know that John has helped with events before. I think Dan has helped somewhat with them. I think Jack's kind of in the same boat as me. So I'm going to have very little input on this one tonight.
All right.
You can always
Even
weigh in as well.
having
like,
played,
what's good.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I'm going to be approaching it from a player aspect because, unfortunately, I just haven't had time in some ways to do stuff,
Yep.
Yeah.
Especially lately.
So yeah, and I've designed some missions, helped design missions, and I have played a lot of narrative, a real lot of narrative missions. Some of the old school campaigns, a lot of stuff they put out, and I running events and missions and events. I have a very different opinion than Garage Hammer campaign missions. And so I mean, I don't know where we want to start on this, as far as designing missions, but I will say one of the things that I have realized is that you very easily can design missions for events that are way overboard and people will just not use a lot of the special rules because they'll forget them. So
Simple is definitely better.
So if you put a concept together, you have a couple of special rules, and you don't have 17 special rules with 7 NPCs and special conditions happening if it's the second Tuesday of the month. Flare gun or whatever, right? I've seen missions that are definitely too far. And events we've all been at, right? And not putting people down, right? People, I love narrative missions, but when I get in an event and I'm playing the second or the third event on the second day of a con, and I'm, half brain dead, and I've had a couple of Malort shots and some other kind of booze to wash the Malort taste out of my mouth, and I'm a little tipsy. All those rules are just too much, right? So it's there's different levels, and simple is better for events for 100%.
So do we need to have like us go over rules after we've been drinking Malort to see how capable the rules are being interpreted and played with, or not?
I mean, I'll kind of expand on that. I mean, I think if you're making an event game, I would definitely obviously play test it, but play test it in various ways. Don't just make it your first game of the event. Let's say you're playtesting Adepticon games. You would do that by running a couple one-day events and things like that, or playing with your friends to playtest those games. But don't just play it as your first game of the day. Play it as your third and fourth game of the day, where you're just dead tired, you don't care anymore, and you just kind of want to see how stupid this thing sounds. The other way to do that is, oftentimes what I'll do is I'll write missions, when the moment strikes me, but I'll come back and look at them throughout the week, after work or when I've done other stuff, kind of where my brain is already kind of frazzled, where I just want to go back through it and make sure it makes sense from a point of view of someone that's not paying as close attention as I was when I was writing it. And a lot of that can also be done by making sure that some of your weirder campaigny stuff, if they don't want to do it, it's not going to wreck your event. So, if you look at Lucas's NPCs and things like that, a lot of those, if the users don't use them, it doesn't change the overall event insanely much. You'll lose a couple of campaign points, or you won't do certain things, but it won't disrupt the entire event to the point where no one else can play. So if you're, one of the missions I wrote for an apocalypse event that I ran, there was a couple of big guns that if you took them over, you walked up to these pieces of archaeotech and you rolled a dice. On a 1, the device went crazy and it killed everything around it within 6 inches. It just removed any infantry model, period. On a 6, you took it over and it was it had some insane stats and could shell the other table as it walked around. And what was funny is no one wanted to approach it because they all thought they were going to roll 1. Like, it was game-breakingly good if you rolled a 6, but because they thought they would lose 3 tactical Marines, they did not want to take the chance to roll a 1. And the same thing happened in another apocalypse game I ran. I wrote a D66 table. Double 1s was the device exploded, you lost the game. Double 6s was you took over target unit for the rest of the game. I was imagining that they weren't going to roll the dice because it said double 1s, you lose the whole game. We'd set up 4 hours for, but they loved it, and they kept rolling the dice, and they rolled 66 twice, took over 2 super heavy titans, charged the other 2 super heavy titans, and took the entire super heavy back line out of the entire game. So you've got both sides of the crazy spectrum when you're looking at gamers, so make sure it's not something that's going to completely wreck your event if they don't interact with the thing that you're trying to make.
A big thing that stands out to me is you have to be very careful writing any mission where it focuses on taking out enemy units.
Yep.
The reason being is that it's its own reward and its own right, and it can very quickly lead to a just not great game. We've done a few missions up here in Michigan where you had character assassinations, and every time the World Eaters players would just run absolute afield with that, because that is what their army is absolutely geared towards every time, because that is what the World Eaters do.
At the same time, occasionally now I've seen where heavies can score, right? So troops and heavies can score for this game or something like that, or vehicles and heavy score instead of troops and some of that stuff. Now that can certainly favor certain armies over other armies, but in general, when I've seen that done, it still usually has been fun games, right? So you may come in saying, "Well, this guy all of a sudden has 7 scoring units and I have 2." And but I know what my focus is, and it's eliminating those scoring units, or not letting them get to the building where they actually get to score or whatever, right? So you can have lopsided stuff like that, but if it goes too far in one direction, then it's not fun.
It is very much about keeping that harmonious balance. One thing that I really like out of modern 40K, appalling statement, I know, is they handle scoring very differently in that every unit will have an OC value, which is their objective control value. And your regular run-of-the-mill troops will have like a 1 or a 2. Certain units will have a 0, much in the same vein as like destroyer squads can never take objectives. And some will have a really high value. And I think that's a neat feature. And I kind of want to try to capitalize on that to break up some of the regular monotony of, say, just like what Dan was saying, where heavy support squads are now scoring or something like that, where you can add a greater delineation between units, and then units can counteract each other fighting over an objective because they hold a different value of taking that objective. And Legions Imperialis kind of does that in its own way.
Yeah, and you also see some of that too in the logic of you score the quarter. Like some of the missions say you score the quarter if there's no scoring units in it, or there's no infantry units in it, or something like that. And then the objective in that quarter, you score the objective, but you may not have the quarter itself.
What do
There's
y'all
different ways
think
that
of?
they're already doing
Oh,
that.
sorry. What do
Go
y'all
ahead.
think of the missions that maybe it's the last mission of the game, but the middle of the table has the big red button that whoever's on it first and controls it for 3 turns, then they blow everything up and they win or something like that. Um, you guys had good luck or bad luck playing those kinds of missions? What do y'all think of them?
Okay,
There's a
so
couple.
give me one sec, John. I've actually played a game like that. Here in the Kentucky 30K group, there was one mission where this was about a year ago or so, where if you controlled a control panel and you controlled a launching silo, you could launch this Hellstrike missile that basically won you the game. And the guy I was playing, he had control of it because of the way the actual setup was. It was honestly, it was just kind of not fun. It felt like I set my entire army up and wasted my time. We continued playing the game, and it became a fun game, but there was no way I could win anything because he'd already launched the missile. And that's one thing I personally despise is if you do X, you automatically win the game during the middle of a game. I think that is absolutely a horrible way to develop a mission because it limits the other player, it limits both players, and it doesn't lead to a conductive or a conducive game where you're both going to have fun and there can be back and forth. It literally depends on someone hitting an I win button, and that just being, in my mind, bullshit. Just my
Eliminates all
opinion.
subtlety.
It eliminates the nuances of playing the game, and I think that's what we all come for, and that just not something I'm ever a fan of or in favor of.
I could think of 2 other ways that the normal missions score. There's the progressive scoring. So starting on turn 2, you get a point for holding an objective every turn. So therefore, you could wind up with a point score between let's say there's 4 objectives, you can end up with 0 points all the way up to 12 points. The other mission way that people usually do it is at the end of the game, if you're standing on the objective, you get the point. Therefore, you're stuck between 0 and 4 points. Out of those two, I like the progressive scoring a little better sometimes, because in those instances, you can sometimes come back from a defeat by pushing somebody off of it, and it's not just I'm going to stall or I'm not going to care about the game until the last minute. But at the same time, if you don't have a fast army in turns 1 and 2, or that's why usually they start scoring on 2. But if you don't have a fast army on turns 1, 2, and 3 to get to those objectives, you can have it so that the turns 3 and 4, it's just completely impossible to win.
One feature I have seen recently, and I think it was one of the missions out of the Beta Garmin book, which were much better missions than what we've seen previously out of their books, was the objectives you scored were worth points equal to the turn you're in. So as the game progresses, the objectives become more valuable. And it's kind of a foot in both sides of that, where you have progressive scoring, but it's also a touch on the side of at the end of the game, you take it. Because somebody could sit on that objective for turns 2 and 3, but if you have it for turns 4 and 5, you're going to be well ahead.
Do the Beta Garmin missions go to 5, or are they all limited to 4?
They all end on 4.
Yeah. But a point that doesn't negate your point, right? Having it later is worth a lot more. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's all good.
It was one of the things that we had pointed out, in that we thought that was a better design for events. In some ways, capping at 4, because the random events mean that, invariably someone's done an hour and a half before someone else is, right?
Well, the big thing,
that there's issues with the deep striking or the close combat exclusive army that might be coming in from reserves.
Right.
Yeah, that's been the big thing I've noticed, is that limiting it to turn 4 really hurts flyers, deep striking armies, and some hand-to-hand armies that are a little bit slower. But I also have noticed that in the games that I've played of 30K, in the games that I've seen played during my events, by turn 5, there is practically nothing left.
Yep.
Yeah.
Partially deep striking armies, because deep striking armies are going to be fine with a 4-turn game if it's all deep strike, null deploy. But yeah.
Played a Zone Mortalis game with a friend of mine up here, and it's part of a narrative small scale campaign that we've been doing just between the two of us, using my Alpha Legion, or my wife's Alpha Legion, I should say, and his Blood Angels. And one of the Zone Mortalis missions we played, we did a rule where the lights could get sporadically shut off in certain sections of the board, and that would turn it into night fight. That was a very interesting game. It was a lot of fun. And it wasn't a too complicated of a feature to instill into the game, but we got a lot out of it.
That's one thing I've seen in a couple different games lately, is not like random things that can cause damage to units, but random things that can change objective placements. There was one at Adepticon that I kind of stole a little bit off of. Jack and myself played a game with Chris Bergeron and our friend Jeremy from who lives in Germany, and the objectives could poop out other objectives. And that was really kind of an interesting thing, because it made, for progressive scoring, as more objectives appeared, it made the game more chaotic. You had to scramble to try to get someone else over to another objective after it had randomly popped out of another objective. It just seemed kind of neat to me, because obviously as you're going, you're killing the weaker things that you can, get them first. So we had less and less scoring units to score those new objectives that had randomly appeared out of nowhere.
In that vein, what do you guys think of the search for magical MacGuffin missions, where it's like every building you roll a die and the objective may appear, and there's variations to that. One of them is, on a die roll, that building becomes important, and then you keep searching. One of them is it gets progressively easier to check to make sure wherever the MacGuffin is, and then eventually the MacGuffin is the only scoring point. I think that the latter of those two, were, hey, roll a die on the first building you check, so a 6 up, a 5 up, a 4 up, a 3 up, a 2 up. Those ones I don't like, because that last person is basically going to win the game, and you can make it so that the last building you check is going to be deep in your deployment zone, and so it's nearly impossible for someone to get to it. But the other ones, where you kind of turn on the objective or turn on the building to be scoring, I think can be pretty interesting, because you find out that maybe you were pushing towards something you thought was important, and all of a sudden you don't need to be pushing as hard into that as you thought you were.
The idea of pieces of terrain randomly becoming objectives on a roll, not like a progressive roll, but just a random roll. Like this ruin might have an objective in it on a 5 up. That I like, not there are this many objectives and you'll find out once it's rolled how many times or whatever.
Yeah, and there was also the fifth edition, where it was, there's 6 objectives. This one's worth, these 2 are worth 2. This one's worth 3. This one's worth 1. That one's worth 6, or something like that too.
I like that.
It
I like
encourages
that
people from turtling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one thing I always kind of liked idea wise was each of these objectives starts off worth X points, and it's kind of like a reverse of the progressive scoring, but doing a reverse. So, say if you found it, the first turn you hold it, it's worth 3. The second turn you hold it, it's worth 2. And then it just literally degrades as you have gone through whatever, sifted whatever, and found all the intelligence you're going to find. So, say you've captured it turn 2. On turn 2 you get 3 points. On turn 2 you get 2 points. Sorry, on turn 3 you get 2 points, and then on turn 4 you get 1 point. And then it's worth nothing. But anytime your opponent jumps on top of you, they get however many of the points could have remained if they had held it from you or taken it from you. I always kind of liked that idea because it was just different. It encouraged people to play to the actual objectives, not just kill as fast as possible.
Yeah, there was one that 40K Radio did like that, where you could dedicate a unit to an objective, and then you got their victory points every turn that they weren't doing anything but searching. Their victory points towards the pool, and at the end of the game, whoever had the highest pool won. And one of my buddies, if you go back, I don't know if they still got it, but he was like 3x the next guy in line for their global scoring, because his guard army was tuned in such a way that 3/4 of the army didn't need to do anything, so they just camped to the objectives, and he ended that game with something like 120,000 points.
Oh my god! Okay, yeah, that's a little bit ridiculous.
Now,
I get what you're saying with that.
What do you all think of the whole randomized? So you hold an objective at the end of the game, and you roll a dice, and it can be worth 2 to -2 points. I've always kind of not liked those.
I don't like the
I
negative.
absolutely love them.
So
I like everything but the negative.
I'm kind of ambivalent on it. I like the idea of you not finding out how many points the objective is worth until the end of the game. I do not really like negative points that much. But if it's worth 0, I'm fine with it being worth 0.
Yeah, I think that if it's a small swing, right, and if it's a close battle and the randomized gets you, all of a sudden, instead of a minor loss, you get a minor victory, or instead of a minor victory, you get a minor loss. I like it. Where it's like 5 objectives and they're all like 2 to -2, and so you hold 3 of them and the other guy holds 1, and then all of a sudden you roll crappy in those 3 dice rolls. and then the guy's beating you in a game that you really should have had a major victory on, I don't like them. So I like the randomness, but I think it needs to be a small randomness and not a really big randomness, I guess is my take on them.
One thing I do kind of occasionally like, and not on a regular basis, is being able to move objectives. Like, this unit has run over here and captured objective number 3. Um, well, they're not going to do anything because they're just a tactical squad. There's really no point in firing their bolters because they're not in range, whatever, or what have you. And then literally using that unit to transport that objective like 3 or 6 inches further away from the enemy, kind of like an old relic mission, just grabbing the thing and running away with it. That I kind of like the idea of.
You like
And I've seen
the
it.
baggage trains as well, where the objective itself can be it transports itself, or along
Yes,
a
I
track?
do like those. I've always thought those were fun. But I always think that when they do that, it needs to be no matter what, it moves forward X every turn, no matter if you're in control of it or not.
Yep.
But those I think are awesome. I played
It
one of
was
those a long time ago up at Ryan Kimmel's,
Yeah,
and
there
there
was
were
one at Warzone where it was like the building you were running from a volcano, and you were trying one of us was trying to escort a baggage train, the other one was trying to stop the baggage train, and every turn the volcano lava moved 2d6 inches or something, but the vehicles would always move an inch further, and so that way you never had to worry about the vehicles blowing up, but you could suicide somebody to try to slow it down and stuff like that. It was probably one of the more fun missions I played. It was knights against knights, and we were going crazy.
one thing I did like about that one up at Ryan's was that the even though it was, I can't remember what vehicle it specifically was, but you could not destroy the vehicle. The vehicle itself was going to keep going no matter what. So you couldn't pen it, you couldn't shoot it, you couldn't close assault it with melta bombs, whatever, to destroy it and leave it one location. It kept going. So your squad who was with it had to keep running alongside of it, doing whatever. And slowly, as those guys got attrited down by gunfire, it became okay. Now I'm using the actual objective to block line of sight for my enemy trying to kill me, and that was kind of
Mhm.
fun.
Those are always kind of thematic because it's like, the old movie train robbery
Yeah,
scenario.
that's exactly how it felt to me, and it was just fun. There were, I think, in that mission 2 objectives. I think they were 10 inches apart, maybe 12, and they literally ran along a pair of tracks or a pair of roads or whatever. And it was just neat. And I think non non bog standard missions like that just add to flavor of stuff. And I've always been a fan of that. Don't ask me to design them, however, because my brain will come up with some really weird and wacky nonsense, which I have proven in my conversations with Brian.
That's why you have proofreading.
Yeah, that you absolutely. That is one thing that probably should get touched on. Is if you're designing missions for an event, have someone who's not connected to the event, or even someone who has proofread it, and have it. If you're going to throw any levels of complexity into it, make certain you can still make it understandable, because the keep it simple, stupid rule is always going to be there. If
Yeah,
the
there's
more
a
complexity you add to it, the more confusion, the longer the game's going to take, and the more likely it is that people are going to get upset about something.
Yeah, I used to write my missions when I worked at the hobby shop the night before if I, wasn't reusing them. And I'd always write them zoomed out, and usually after doing a copious amounts of homework because I was working or going to school at the same time. And one of the missions ended up having a typo, and it was so zoomed out I didn't notice a little red squiggle on it. And so instead of battle in the warp, it was battle in the WAP. And so that became an inside joke for the guys for the next couple of years while I worked there.
There you go.
Wonderful. It's just like writing a book. You write so many pages, you have your editor go through, they take all the stuff that just doesn't make sense, disrupts the continuity, clean it up.
Have other people read your missions too, right? at Adepticon a couple of years ago, Zach and I put out a mission, and Nick came up and he's like, "This doesn't work. I'm going to win this on turn one. The way this is written exactly like is. This should really say this." And it was like, it was the 2-word change, and it was like, it made perfect sense, and it was only going to affect certain armies, but it was like we just completely missed it the way it read, and I forget what it was. So then the next day we used the same mission, and it's like, okay, this is the Nick rule, and this is what this should really say. And
Hmm.
so no matter how many times you read something and you think it's right, and you have other people read it, make sure you have a couple people extra put their 2 cents in. I don't know, it doesn't matter as much because it's not tournaments, but still good idea.
At the end of the day, these people are coming to your event, so you want to try to put the best foot forward you can.
Yep.
Anybody else got any input on this topic?
I
John,
would
how
also
much do you
say,
like? How much do you like robots that drop from the sky and shoot death lasers at everybody in IG armies or Solar Ox armies?
I'm not getting the reference there, buddy.
From Adepticon. His Solar Ox army was getting absolutely decimated by those robot walker things in Lucas's
oh
event.
yeah, I was going to say that those, if you're going to write missions, make sure that they're kind of fair for everybody, and those things seem to be designed to just scythe through militia. But I mean, that's kind of everything is at this point, though. I was going to say the other thing I would recommend is don't be afraid to go back and look through not just someone else's old missions, but also GW's old missions. I talked a couple weeks ago about when I ran the local event here, where I just took the battle missions book from 5th or 4th edition and changed some things up. Third, fourth, and fifth edition codexes had missions in there where it was specifically designed to do things. Like I remember the Grey Knights one where, uh, stop the ritual, where everyone had enemy units that deploy in circles, and at the end of the game, if there were no enemy units deployed in circles anymore, you won, or summoned a greater demon if you failed that, or something like that. So there's a lot of things that you can add on to units or add on to your missions that are already play tested for you.
The battle mission book is a good resource. I have a PDF of that somewhere.
I have one of those. I thought the one I have is the 7th edition one, though. And it strikes me that there was, when I got in at the very end of 7th, that it also had some um detachments or whatever the hell they were,
Yeah,
rules in it.
there was that stretch of how to play the game extra books. Like there was the plane book, and then there was the planetary assault book, and then there was City Fight Mark II, and then there was a bunch of other stuff like that. All those ones came together. There was one in 40K closing out 8th or 9th edition where they had City Fight missions, and you had cards, and you could track your event that way. And I always wanted to pick up that box set to kind of see what they were going through as far as headspace and design space went, but never found it.
Back in the day, like I was gonna say that book I picked up was sitting in a game store for half off, and it was
Yep.
like because the next edition was out, right, and nobody wants to play missions from a previous edition, but there's a whole lot of that mission. A lot of missions are game version generic, right? They'll work. 6th edition missions will work in Heresy 2.0, for example. So
Yeah, if you can't find them on the high seas, you can always hit eBay and find some of those books pretty cheap because, like Dan said, that they're older editions, so people necessarily don't want to buy them for the new rules. They want to, but that's what you want them for, is the older mentalities and thought processes.
Or you just ping one of our guys that have been like us that have been around for 47 years playing the game, and we probably have it sitting under. One of us probably has it sitting on the shelf, if not all of us.
Yeah, and to that too, you can also ping people that run other events, and I'm sure they will be more than happy to help you with mission design or to supply some stuff that they've already done.
I keep the packet books from every event I've ever been in,
Yep.
so I can pull up old missions and use them for inspiration, or even if I just want to play a game with my kid and grab a random mission, just pull something out. So they aren't organized in any way, shape, or form, but I've thought about getting a 3-ring binder and starting to go through and organize them so they're all just random pieces of paper stuck here and there around my hobby area. But that's a different conversation altogether.
Thank you, Jack.
Well, there's two different outlooks that I have.
Okay.
If 99% of the time I want to roll up to a table, shake hands, roll dice, and about, I don't know, 97 minutes into it go, oh yeah, there's admission packets with all these special rules. F it. And then continue to roll dice and have fun during the game. And that is, I'm going to say, 99% of the games I play. The other half of it is I want multiple objectives all going at the same time with multiple avenues of winning the game. Kind of like old ATC during 5th edition that had kill points, objective, and command and conquer, or command and control. I personally, and I salute everybody to have time to go through and figure all this stuff out, like NPCs and special rules. I don't remember them halfway through the game. I don't remember them 2 minutes into the game. I just want to go have fun, talk with cool people, talk about, this, that, and the other thing, have fun at my game, shake hands, and then go to the next table to hopefully rinse and repeat for the whole entire event that I'm at.
That is one thing that kind of does need to be mentioned. You have your own special rules. Their army has their own special rules. When you add more to the table, it does get more confusing. And as you go through an event where it's got like 3 games, the first mission, yeah, sure, lots of fun, new mission types, new rules, awesome, whatever. But as the day goes by, you get more and more tired of the different things that make the game change. And by the 3rd game, you're likely to have people who are like, man, I just don't care about this stuff. If you're running an event, one thing I always thought, or I kind of think, is have the special rules be in game 1 and game 2, and then kind of make game 3 be simple, be like straightforward, almost a book mission, or a book mission with your own theme on it, but don't complicate it over much, because at that point people are tired, and people are less likely to want to play the special rules, if that makes sense.
It's a very real thing.
I'm tired before I even
part
start.
Of the reason, I think that's part of the reason why the what do we call it? The missions that you start at 2,500 or 3,000 points, then you play 2,000, and you play 1,500 or whatever. What do we call those?
Well, it's not the other way is escalation, but
yeah, the
attrition
battles. Yeah, that's gone over really well at Adepticon since we introduced that, and I think that's part of the reason, right? You've got less of your toys and less of the rules and less to think about as the day goes on, right? It's a neat concept anyway, because you're down fighting, you're going to have less and less stuff, so it works thematically, but I think it also fits that same thought pattern that as you get later in the day, the games are easier, so it just kind of flows well that way.
And also putting all your rules together. If you want to have NPCs, have little cards like Lucas does, helps a lot with those people that either don't want to think a lot or want it as simple as possible. That way, everything is here together. I don't have to think about it. If I don't have any NPCs, I don't have to care. If you've got them, you can just hand me the card and I can look at it for 3 seconds and figure out if I want to give a shit or not.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the big things is how much give a shit are you going to have left during that game?
An interesting thing that I know a few people in our world have done successfully is secret objectives that get dealt out to players before their matches even start.
Yep.
And it's an interesting concept, and it's something that I need to spend more time considering, because it could be very enjoyable or very, very unenjoyable.
Yeah, I know that before some of the missions have been like, well, here's your secret objective. Because you're fighting against loyalists and you happen to be playing Sister Silence, your objective is to go kill Likers. You look across the table and like they don't have any. Like, great, you can't play this thing, so you kind of feel, you get the feel bad.
The
So I
Michigan
think a
Chief
part of them is good.
Michigan GT did that one year where the general, right? They run it to where loyalists and traders have a general, and so they would have like a stack of secret objectives for the day, be it 5 or 6 of them, and then you
Mm-hmm.
could go around. And so like this battlefield, it's like, okay, kill a fast attack or kill all their fast attack or something like that. And so you pass it out to the table that it makes sense, right? You don't give that one to the one that doesn't have any fast attacks opposite, right? So that's a way you can handle that and make those secret objectives. And then it's not everybody has to think about it. It's the one person you gave it to that, okay, she has to kill all the heavies against from her because they only have one heavy, not the guy playing the tank list or whatever, right? So
Yep.
that's a way you can do those and make them kind of more fair in that regard, to where it's everybody can play to their mission.
It has to be specific enough to be interesting, but broad enough to be applicable.
Yeah,
It's a good way to put it.
that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, the other way I've seen it is you have, kind of like Dan was saying, you've got a multitude of them, and that way you can choose each round to whether or not you want to score them, so that you've got 5 possible over the whole event. And so, do you use this one for game 1? Do you use this one for game 2? Those are fine until you end up at the last game and you just can't do it. You didn't choose your kill the psyker ones because you haven't fought a psyker yet, and then you can end up not fighting a psyker at all. So I do like the way that Dan said, where you've got the team leader and they go through, they just do a quick run through and walk by every table before the event's going hard and heavy, maybe during the starts of turn 1, and say, hey, I've got these secret objectives, can you supply any of these? And I've also seen those work really well in Apocalypse too, where everyone's working together to perform the secret objective this turn is, make sure we kill the most number of people in close combat or something like that, where that's the secret objective this turn. So it's not something the enemy can react to or know about, but it's something that you can all work together to do.
Does anyone here remember the 7th edition mission cards that they
Yes,
used to sell?
Yep.
Drunk Hammer?
Kind of, yeah. But you pulled like
Go take Hill
4
43. I mean, don't take Hill 43. I mean, go take Hill 45.
Yeah, those things. Except there was a Heresy set that was done years ago that was actually run at Adepticon.
Yeah, Grey Legion put them out.
They did. I still have a set of those. I may
They
actually
were
have 2 sets. I'm not
they were
sure.
an adaptation of the Shadow Crusade missions from
7th edition.
whichever. Well, I think it was from whichever Black Book had the Shadow Crusade missions in the Shadow Crusade campaign, but they had tweaked them and put them on the cards. But yeah, I had bought those, and I think they may have gotten destroyed in a flood in my basement. But I thought those were really cool too.
I wonder if I find where they are, because I know I have them somewhere. I kind of wonder if using something like that to let people pick their own mission and kind of craft their own mission during a game wouldn't actually be something that could be kind of neat. Like at the beginning of an event, pass out this deck of cards with like, call it 20 or 21, and let people pick 4 objectives they can have for each game out of those cards.
Did they come in a black box?
I think those were.
Yes.
Those were set up that it set the table, right? So one of them was, here's your your hot dog hamburger setup, weren't they?
Nope.
Or is that different? Okay.
I
That
think
was the
hang on a
Great
sec.
War cards that GW made.
Okay. Yeah, I know I had those, but I think like I said, I think I lost them in a flood, so I don't. Yeah.
There was a
I
couple
have
different.
them.
Were they called the
found the deck of cards,
Adepticon
but
Tactical
probably not
Objective
before.
deck?
Yes, yes, they were.
Do you know what I found?
Did you just find that?
Yeah, because I stuck them away for a rainy day.
Yep. So I've got a set or two somewhere around here. But building up a set of like 24 cards or something like that, and letting people pick 3 of those cards to craft their own objectives during a mission, and have their opponent pick 3 of their own cards from their own deck, to where you've used these 3 during this mission, so now you can't use them in the next mission. Then you take 3 more in a different mission, and then 3 more in a different mission, or something like that. I think to where you could actually build your own missions on the tables around the narrative, and then have maybe one central one provided by the scenario would be kind of neat. Let people play to the strengths of their own army, to where it's not just the table has the mission or the game presents the mission for everybody. Everybody can play their own unique flavors and kind of craft their own missions, kind of forge their own narrative during their own game.
Are you talking about the old Maelstrom mission objective that was in 7th edition?
Yes,
That's
kind of like that.
That's the term that they used then?
Yes, that's what I'm thinking about.
Forge the narrative. I think that's someone else's podcast.
Yeah, that's yeah, it probably is.
Sorry. But yeah, no. Cool. I think we've probably beaten that to death at this point.
I think we kind of have.
Well, and I'm running out of time.
I think most of us are. Shall we call it a night, gentlemen?
I believe we should. You rolling us out, John?
Absolutely. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining us.
Before we do, one thing we probably want to mention: voting in the Discord for everyone's favorite.
Ends tomorrow.
Ends tomorrow. Ends tomorrow at 8 a.m. I might run it till noon, just so that anybody who's listening to this early in the morning and hasn't had a chance to vote gets a chance to go ahead and do so.
That's a bold assumption, assuming I'll get this out tonight.
It's a good idea.
Well, you know what?
Maybe we run it till Tuesday at 8 o'clock.
I'll just go ahead and run it until Tuesday at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Or just run it all through Monday, because you said the 20th, so I would just say all through the 20th, and that way it ends at 21st.
I'll also put an announcement in the contest channel.
Yep. Good idea. But I'd like to thank everyone for joining us on our 83rd episode of the Heresy Accountability Buddies. And today I was joined by
Brian,
Dan,
Duncan,
Jack,
Jamie.
And always remember to stay accountable to yourself and to your buddies and to your hobby. Thanks, everybody.
Let's stop recording. There you go.
Like and subscribe, and see ya.